For over half a month, the world has watched a regional crisis mutate into an unprecedented global emergency. What began as a localized confrontation in the Middle East has rapidly escalated into a multi-front war, dragging the global economy and the world's preeminent superpower into a treacherous new phase. At the center of this escalating catastrophe is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow, vital maritime artery through which a massive percentage of the world's energy supply flows. Today, it is effectively under siege. The geopolitical power balance of the 21st century is being aggressively redrawn in real time. But to understand how this situation developed, we must examine the strategic miscalculation that ignited this explosive second phase of the conflict. The tipping point occurred when U.S. President Donald Trump authorized a devastating aerial bombardment of Kharg Island. This was not a standard military target. Kharg Island is the beating heart of Iran's energy infrastructure. Because the coastal waters of the Iranian mainland are too shallow for massive oil supertankers, Tehran relies on the deepwater harbor at Kharg Island to dock, refuel, and load its crude oil for global export. By obliterating this facility, Washington aimed to achieve an immediate economic decapitation, cutting off the financial lifeblood that sustains the Iranian state. From the Oval Office, the strike was quickly hailed as a decisive victory. President Trump publicly declared that the Iranian war machine had been permanently crippled. But what military planners failed to anticipate was Iran's next move, a maneuver that would instantly paralyze the global supply chain. Rather than capitulate, Tehran activated a long-held military doctrine of asymmetric retaliation. Iran issued a chilling ultimatum. If its own oil infrastructure was destroyed, it would ensure that not a single drop of oil from the neighboring Gulf states would reach the open ocean. Overnight, the Strait of Hormuz was transformed into a militarized choke point. Iran established a de facto blockade, asserting unprecedented control over one of the most critical maritime corridors on Earth. And this is where the story takes a darker, far more complicated. Behind the public declarations of victory, a very different reality was unfolding behind closed doors in Washington. Intelligence assessments soon revealed a startling vulnerability. The United States, despite possessing the most formidable naval fleet in human history, lacked a concrete, viable strategy to unilaterally break an entrenched Iranian blockade in the strait. Faced with the specter of a global economic meltdown and devastating disruptions to international supply chains, the White House initiated a desperate diplomatic maneuvering campaign. President Trump, who had spent the previous year publicly alienating traditional allies, was suddenly forced to issue urgent appeals for military assistance. The diplomatic response was a stunning rebuke. Only days prior, Washington had explicitly told the British Prime Minister to keep UK naval vessels out of the theater, confidently asserting that American forces did not require Allied aircraft carriers. Now, as Washington requested international escorts to break the blockade, the response from European capitals was ice cold. France categorically refused to deploy its naval assets, framing the crisis as a direct result of American strategic missteps. But what intelligence officials discovered next shocked even experienced analysts. While Western allies distanced themselves from the fallout, other global powers began to quietly exploit the chaos. China, recognizing a historic opportunity to bypass the US dollar, initiated a covert economic game. Reports emerged that Iranian authorities were selectively allowing certain cargo ships to navigate the blockaded strait, provided that the underlying oil transactions were settled in Chinese yuan rather than American dollars. Simultaneously, back-channel negotiations between Iran and India yielded positive diplomatic breakthroughs, securing energy pipelines for New Delhi while systematically undermining Washington's isolation strategy. Iran was no longer merely defending its territory, it was aggressively dismantling the American economic monopoly in the region. Tehran even issued a bold mandate, declaring that any nation wishing safe passage through the strait must financially compensate Iran or explicitly sever diplomatic ties with the United States and Israel. As the economic war escalated, the kinetic military reality on the ground began to rapidly deteriorate for American forces. The United States military relies heavily on a doctrine of unparalleled air superiority. But that superiority requires a massive logistical tail, specifically aerial refueling tankers like the KC-135, which allow American fighter jets to project power across vast distances. In a calculated, high-precision campaign, Iranian-backed forces began systematically targeting this Achilles heel. Intelligence reports indicate that at least 7 critical U.S. aerial refuelers were either destroyed or forced out of action. Without the ability to refuel in midair, America's overwhelming air dominance was suddenly and severely constrained.
But the retaliation did not stop at logistical hubs. Iranian authorities traced the origins of the Kharg Island strike to military installations in the United Arab Emirates, specifically near Ras Al Khaimah. Declaring these host nations as legitimate targets, Iran broadened the theater of war. Simultaneously, in neighboring Iraq, heavily armed Iranian-backed militias launched a ferocious assault on the U.S. consulate in Baghdad. The heavily fortified Green Zone, long considered a bastion of American security in the region, was abruptly evacuated. The illusion of safety had evaporated. Yet, as American military dominance faced an unprecedented stress test, an even deeper mystery was brewing in the halls of power in Tel Aviv. While Washington grappled with a multi-front crisis, the state of Israel found itself facing an existential threat from the skies. The defensive shields that had long protected Israeli cities, such as the Iron Dome and David's Sling, were reaching the limits of their operational capacity. Ammunition stockpiles were critically depleted, and crucial radar infrastructures, including advanced THAAD systems reportedly sourced from South Korea, were systematically targeted and destroyed by Iranian precision strikes. In a terrifying escalation, reports surfaced that cluster munitions were being deployed over Tel Aviv. The resulting widespread fragmentation deeply traumatized a civilian population already weary from conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon, shifting the psychological balance of the war. But amidst the wailing sirens and the collapsing defense grids, a profound geopolitical silence took hold. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, typically a ubiquitous presence during times of national crisis, vanished from the public eye. Rumors immediately flooded intelligence networks and social media platforms. Was the Israeli Prime Minister orchestrating the war from a fortified underground bunker? Had a targeted strike compromised his safety? Or was a far more dangerous, secretive strategic calculation being devised in the dark? While the physical battlefield burns, an equally fierce war is being waged over the flow of information. As the military reality on the ground deteriorates, a massive cognitive dissonance is emerging between what the public is being told and what is actually happening. In Washington, the narrative of absolute victory is beginning to crack under the weight of classified intelligence. Reports of significant damage to the USS Abraham Lincoln, a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier, and devastating drone strikes in Fujairah have been systematically suppressed. In the United Arab Emirates, strict gag orders have been implemented. Citizens caught filming or sharing footage of military damage face immediate arrest. But the most unprecedented development is occurring within the borders of the United States itself. Faced with the exposure of severe strategic vulnerabilities, the Trump administration has launched an aggressive campaign to muzzle the American press. In a move that defies decades of democratic norms, the president has openly threatened to revoke the broadcasting licenses of media conglomerates that fail to provide pro-war or nationalistic reporting. The very nation that has historically positioned itself as the global arbiter of press freedom is now enforcing a draconian information blackout. This suppression reveals a critical geopolitical truth. The United States is no longer merely fighting to project power, it is fighting to conceal its own vulnerability. And this is where the strategic map becomes exponentially more dangerous. If the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz was the opening salvo of this economic war, military analysts are now bracing for the deployment of a second, devastating choke point. Intelligence assessments point southward toward Yemen. The Houthi movement, heavily aligned with Tehran, possesses the capability to completely seal off the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
If this dual blockade scenario materializes, it would effectively sever the maritime arteries connecting Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The global supply chain would not just be disrupted, it would be paralyzed. Oil prices would breach historic thresholds, triggering a cascading global economic meltdown. But behind this looming economic catastrophe lies a cold, calculated military strategy. Iran and its regional proxies are playing a brutal game of attrition. They understand that advanced Western air defense systems, like Israel's Iron Dome and David's Sling, are technologically superior but logistically fragile. Every multi-million-dollar interceptor fired is one less in the arsenal, and the United States simply does not possess the manufacturing capacity to replenish these interceptors at the rate they are being consumed. Paramilitary groups like Hezbollah and the IRGC are strategically holding back their vast arsenals of lower-tier rockets. They are patiently waiting for the defensive shields of Israel and U.S. regional bases to reach a state of total tactical depletion. Once the shield falls, the true barrage begins. This terrifying realization is forcing traditional American allies to completely reevaluate their geopolitical survival.
For decades, the Gulf states have relied on the United States as their ultimate security guarantor. But that foundational trust is now fracturing. Realizing that American protection has transformed into a strategic liability, nations like the UAE are frantically attempting to distance themselves from Washington's military operations. Behind closed doors, a massive geopolitical realignment is taking shape. Gulf monarchies are actively exploring new defense architectures, looking toward rising military powers like Turkey and Pakistan to secure their sovereignty. The American hegemony in the Middle East is not just being challenged, it is actively dissolving. But as the conventional avenues for victory evaporate, the specter of the ultimate weapon has entered the geopolitical calculus. Diplomatic off-ramps have been thoroughly dismantled. The ceasefire conditions proposed by Tehran are completely unpalatable to Washington. Iran is demanding full American withdrawal from the Middle East and comprehensive financial reparations for the destruction of its infrastructure. For a U.S. administration that has staked its entire political survival on projecting absolute dominance, capitulation is not an option. Simultaneously, the state of Israel faces an existential precipice. With their defense grids failing and the economy hemorrhaging, panic is setting in. And it is within this atmosphere of absolute desperation that intelligence agencies have flagged the most chilling scenario of all: the deployment of a nuclear device. Military doctrine dictates that a nuclear state, when facing imminent conventional collapse, may resort to its ultimate deterrent. But to do so in the modern era requires a justification that the international community, or at least its own population, can swallow. Senior Iranian officials, alongside independent geopolitical analysts, have issued grave warnings regarding a potential false flag operation. The intelligence assessment suggests a terrifying possibility that a catastrophic attack could be orchestrated on American or Allied soil, explicitly designed to be blamed on Tehran. This engineered atrocity would provide the necessary global mandate to execute a nuclear strike against Iran, attempting to end the war through absolute annihilation. We are no longer witnessing a mere regional conflict. The guardrails of international law and diplomatic restraint have been completely incinerated. The United States finds its military dominance checked and its global narrative unraveling. The Middle East stands on the brink of an unprecedented restructuring, while the global economy teeters on the edge of the abyss. As the architects of this war retreat into their bunkers, the world is left to confront a chilling reality. The era of unchecked superpower intervention has met its violent end, and in the vacuum left behind, a new, infinitely more dangerous world order is being forged in fire.